Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the Knicks finally have a head coach. After,
Where's
after
the
a few,
where's the clap sound? Where
like,
is
like
it?
for real though, like I feel like
Where's the sound effect?
all season we've been just sitting here waiting for who's going to be our coach because Fizdale got fired, really quickly into the season. We had
Yeah,
Mike Miller, and now Tom Thibodeau has agreed on a 5-year deal to become the new Knicks head coach. Uh, if
five.
you if you remember, he was with us back in the days with Jeff Van Gundy as an assistant coach playing or coaching here in New York. So he has some familiarity with the New York area. But I would love to hear some of your thoughts on this, Dave. I know that you were really gung ho about this. Yet you had some facts that you wanted to share with everyone and break down some good information on Tibbs.
Well, here's the thing. It's not that I had any specific facts. It's just that from hearing everything about what insiders are talking about, Tibbs really wanted this job, and he wanted it to prove he could still coach.
Mhm.
I think from the standpoint of what I saw and what I read and what I hear,
Mhm.
I think that he's going to be a good fit in New York. I think you need a guy that has had a good resume, had a tremendous did a tremendous coaching job in Chicago. Didn't really go too well or his way in with the Timberwolves,
Mhm.
but I think he fits right into a system like the Knicks, where it's really a fresh start. You're gonna any sort of success is gonna be success, if you know what I'm saying. I think right now we need somebody that's going to get us above the hump of being a losing franchise. I don't see, as a big Knick fan, I haven't really been excited to watch the Knicks in a long time. And I don't mean that from the standpoint of watching the games, because I do watch the games, just from the standpoint of not being relevant, not winning games, not being in
Sure,
games.
sure.
And I'm tired of that sort of environment and just being comfortable and complacent with that. I think Thibodeau brings a different
Well,
level
I mean, I
of.
would say this. I don't think Fizdale wanted to put up a losing
No, I,
record.
I agree. I
I
agree. I don't
also
think I
think
don't think
that
he did a bad job. I think we fired him too early.
I'm not going to say that I think he did do a bad job. I
Okay.
do think he did a bad job. I don't like the way he was running the team. I think that's why they fired him halfway through the season, or not even halfway through the season. I mean, if you look at the difference of when they hired Mike Miller to when they had Fizdale, Fizdale had a huge win loss differential, where at least Miller was only 10 games below 500. Like, we still were bad, but at least we were better under Miller.
Hmm.
I don't like a lot of the things that Fizdale was doing. He was giving the Randall too much the ball in ISO situations
I
at the top
agree.
of the key for him to create. When he's a power forward, that's better. Either getting the ball in the post off of pick and pop or doing something as a secondary role. I really didn't like what he was doing with his point guard rotations. So I mean, honestly, I was someone that went out and thought Fizdale would be a great coach for the Knicks,
Me too.
because he
Me
did
too.
have a good history in Memphis. But the problems
Agree.
with not Pal, but Marcus All really led to him, leaving Memphis. So I thought that he'd be a good fit for the Knicks, but he really wasn't.
He
And
wasn't.
I know that you had said that Thibodeau did great in Chicago.
He
Uh,
did.
in Minnesota, he kind of stumbled, and he's taking this Nick jobs to prove that he can still coach.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of something I feel like a lot of the Knicks fans have seen from a lot of their coaches lately. It's like first time coach trying to prove that he has it, or old coach that's trying to show up and shows that he can do it, or old players now going to get an opportunity to prove that he can do it. We don't ever get like a premier main guy from the
I
standpoint
don't
of
think that that's true.
being
I think
being
who was the guy? Who was
being
the guy from the Hawks? Who was the guy?
Like a Brad Stevens, or like a
Who was
Phil
the
Jackson
coach?
when he was in his prime.
Yeah, but who was the guy from the Hawks that was a
Lenny
legend?
Wilkins.
Lenny Wilkins.
Ugh,
Lenny Wilkins was another
ugh,
great coach.
great coach.
He was a great
His
coach.
wins and loss record is almost even. He's like Don Nelson. They're guys that have just been in the league so long that they've accumulated wins. Lenny Wilkins is an okay coach. You're not going to come tell me that he's
The fact that listen, I'm not the fact that we're here discussing this many coaches in our era. Listen, what are we? 34,
I agree.
33. That's my problem. And I mentioned some of those guys because they had clearly good careers before the Knicks, and then they get to
Sure.
the Knicks and they didn't have necessarily the right. At some point, you have to look at your franchise and say it's your franchise. It's not your
That
coach.
that 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 that,
Um,
that is what I was exactly going to say with you, is that is it not a position of maybe the coaches just don't have the talent in order to win? You know,
um, I think that 100% it has to do with the front office.
Mhm.
Steve Mills has been in there too long.
Well, Steve
Uh,
Mills is gone now. You
no,
got
they did.
you
Right,
got
you're right.
Leon
You're right.
Rose now, who's leading the way.
Right,
Leon Rose had the
right.
relationship
You're
with
right. You're
Tibs.
right.
You got WWW Worldwide West out there. They're all former CAA
I don't
people.
know.
So with the CAA, obviously they have
I
connections
meant
through.
wasn't there too long, but yeah, right.
Right. And with the CAA connections, obviously the reason why Dolan liked him is because he thought that he'd be able to help get some of these free agents because they have the networks. Obviously, he used to hold or
Listen, this is a
Chris
nice change of
Paul,
pace.
Camelo, all these other guys were under CAA. So
Right.
that's one of the big things that they were talking about. Do you
You
think?
got a nice change of pace here. You got a nice change of pace. I think that this is good. Do we if it all boils down to Dolan, I wish we had a different owner. um, really?
I mean,
Did you just nod on saying Dolan? Like what do you like about Dolan?
listen,
What is he giving us in our era?
listen. Here's what I'll say: is this Dolan, as the owner of the Knicks, has not produced any winner ever. Dolan, as the owner of the Knicks, has his best some of his best days are basically insanity. That's some of the biggest highlights we've had in the past 20 years, and that's saying much when it was a streak of an undrafted free agent who went off and we didn't even make the playoffs. So I agree with you. Dolan hasn't done a lot, but one thing Dolan has done is he spent the money. He's made some
What is
bad
that?
choices. He's
So what
picked
does
some
that do?
bad guys that have been
So,
bad, but he's given like it's not like the Mets where I watch an owner that doesn't even invest in his team. That consistently you're sitting back and you're like, we're in New York, spend money, and they don't spend money. It's not like the Jets where they consistently get top, but where they've never been relevant ever. I think with the Knicks, the biggest thing is Dolan sometimes needs to get out of his own way, and I like that he's given more, power to the people in the front office to do what they got to do. I like Scott Perry, who came over last year. He's been really solid. I think that we've made some really decent moves. He was part of the trade that sent Carmelo over to the Thunder, and he got us Mitchell Robinson, who was our only player that I believe it was either Bleacher Report or SI or one of those publications had as a top 100 player. He was the only player that we had that was ranked that high. But I think we have some pieces finally. I think
I, hogwash. You giving me for the part of Dolan.
right.
Terrible owner who's made terrible decisions.
What
All
is this terrible decision? Like hiring bad
hi-
people?
hiring terrible. So wait, as a leader in the business and
You're right. But
basically, if
you
you're the leader of the
make
franchise, owner, you're gonna tell me that hiring the wrong people is not a bad job. That is your job. You're hiring because you're hiring Phil Jackson doesn't mean that
You're right.
you've given him the tools to be successful. Yes, apparently he gave him the keys, and Phil Jackson didn't
Right.
necessarily. But you can't force people to come to New York that don't want to be there after
You're
you have had such a long term, you know, unsuccessful
right.
rate. Nobody wants to come here.
But
Nobody wants to play in New York. And he's the one that's driven that fact. I mean, even LeBron, and they talked about some of the meetings that LeBron took, and he
Brown
wanted
wasn't
to.
coming here.
Well, okay, fine. Whether he wanted to come here or not, but they said that the meetings were a mess. Whether he was coming or not, it doesn't matter. The fact that somebody went out there and said that the meetings were a mess, and you're coming to New York, this is supposed to be Broadway. I mean, it's supposed to be the limelight, right? You're supposed to be one of the biggest franchise in the game, the
Let's
most
put it like
valued
this.
franchise in the game. No, let
Yes,
me
the
finish.
most valued
Wait,
franchise. He
this
built the
is
most valued franchise. He did
Dad.
something right.
Dad built the
Did
most
something
valued
right.
franchise.
We are losing, and we're the most valuable franchise in the NBA. You got
What
to
is
do
that? What do
something
you?
right.
How does that even like? Why are you making that point, Taco?
What do
Don't
you
don't
not-
don't don't
not like
don't
you-
stand here and be. Don't try to give me the contrary sort of standpoint because you're telling me because you're the richest, you're the best, and that doesn't ever
That's not what I'm saying.
No,
I'm
that is because you're saying because people in this team is in New York where there's obviously more people where it gives the environment for
the
more
Lakers.
dollars when it comes down to
The Lakers.
the Lakers are up there as top
The
one.
Lakers aren't more valuable than the Knicks, and they win.
Oh, okay, but again, from the market, when we look at the market in sports, yes, New York seems to be a little bit higher, but it's not like it's that much higher. We're not talking about the billions of dollar difference. We're talking very close. These two
Maybe
markets
half
are
a
the top
billion,
markets.
a billion. But
Okay,
I mean,
whatever. We don't have the
mostly,
stats right here. I'm just telling you that the fact that you're really standing here and trying to say that Dolan has done anything to really put the Knicks in some sort of competitive
see, that's
environment.
the thing I can't get down with. I agree that Dolan's made some mistakes, but I'm not going to sit here and act like Dolan has been trying to sabotage the team and make us lose.
Absolutely has.
He's been
Absolutely
trying
has.
to make us lose. I will not.
I mean,
We cannot subscribe to that. He's not trying to make us lose. He's
oh
misguided in
wow.
his hirings. I will
There's
say
no.
he
What
hasn't
else
done a
is
great
there? What
job
else
of
does he
hiring.
do? Wait. So in his hirings, so what do you mean? What else has he
He
done?
hired
That
Jackson, who was one of the greatest
everybody
coaches.
boils down to it to Phil Jackson that speaks like you. Phil Jackson is one man that yes doesn't have the ability of telling people you're forced to come here. This man came after this franchise was absolutely nowhere. What did he produce? He produced a guy like KP, right? That it was an unconventional pick that we also got rid of because he didn't want to be here. I mean, when you got rookies wanting to leave town and you bring in
Well, I
every
mean, Phil
single name,
Jackson.
so now I mean, what do you think Thibodeau's gonna do? Right? I mean, if you're giving him the opportunity to lead, let's hope that it brings some sort of different environment to New York and that we get some sort of change of pace. But listen, with Dolan, I don't have any hopes. I think that we need somebody else to really manage that
I mean,
leadership role when it comes down to that team.
see,
That's my thought.
I,
Not saying that
I'll
I
be
don't
real.
agree with you.
I'll be real. Like, okay, the owner hasn't made some of the best hires, and that's definitely hurt us, and that's definitely part of the reason why we're a horrible franchise.
Thank
Absolutely,
you.
you can't deny that. There is no sidestepping that. Dolan is not an owner that you sit back and say he's savvy as far as making moves. I agree. But the last couple of years, he's given power to his people. He's stepped away and he's let them make the moves. Now, during this period of time, contrary to many Knicks fans, what they're looking for, we've gotten some young, talented players on the team that
That's
haven't
because
put it
we've been
together.
bad.
Yeah,
It's
that's
not
right.
through Dolan's
That's
decisions
right.
to get these guys. These guys had no choice but to come here because they got drafted here. You're not going to sit there and tell me that we
Well, I
got
mean,
these
it's
guys
not like we've had a number one pick. We got Mitchell Robinson in the second round. We
right.
got we got
So again,
RJ Barrett in the
those
last draft who
right.
we got him in the third pick. But the second round for Mitchell Robinson is looking like he's going to be again, he's the best next player that we have right now with tremendous upside. I love that Leon Rose really wants to focus in on building up a guy like Ntilikina, who I know the fan base is very mixed about. A lot of people don't like him, and a lot of people love him. It really depends on your side. Personally, I think that Ntilikina has all the makings of a breakout star. He has great defensive potential. Offensively, I think he's a guy that struggles from confidence.
So how do you
Uh,
think Thibodeau is going to do with these pieces?
I honestly, and this is the next thing I wanted to break down to. David West was calling out the hiring of Tom Thibodeau because he thought, maybe guys like Mark Jackson, Ty Lue, and some of these
Which,
other guys deserve a
listen,
second shot.
I'm going to tell you this, just to interject into that point. I've wanted Mark Jackson to be the coach of the Knicks since he left Golden State. I'm thankful that he hasn't been. For what reason? Because it's been a disaster in New York, and it only would have made his stock climb down further. It's been a complete and utter disaster. And would Mark Jackson have made a difference with Dolan in charge? No. With Steve Mills in charge? No. So the reality is that I think it
So
would
then
have been
no
a good
coach can ever take this here because they have Jim
no,
Jones here.
no. I'm not saying that.
I mean,
I'm
we'll
just
never
saying.
be good because he's
No,
at the top.
listen, they got rid of Mills. We got Dolan taking, as you keep saying, a back seat. They hired somebody like Thibodeau. I think that the right decisions are kind of starting to be made.
Sure.
I think we're going to have a better team. I think we're going to have better leadership under Thibodeau. I would have liked Mark Jackson. That would have been my first pick. That's my opinion. Not saying that he's going to be that Thibodeau's not going to be better than Mark Jackson. David West. I think some of his gripes come from what he's saying. What were some of the things he was saying? I know that you gave me a little bit of that, but
I mean, we have some of the David West comments like right here. He's like, how many times can you fail up as a black coach? I feel for the young players who will be stagnant, but we blame for not working hard. I mean, Thibodeau does have a history with young players of not really playing them and making them, overwork and not really give them the shot to shine. Which on the Knicks, if that means we have a lot of young guys. So by not giving these young guys a shot, it could really be detrimental.
He has no choice in New York.
But
Who's he gonna play? What veteran is he gonna put out
oh
there
my
instead of a
God, we
young
signed
guy?
Todd Gibson. The
Yeah,
fucking
but
Todd
I
Gibson
know.
was getting so many minutes, and I'm sitting there watching. Why is Mitchell not playing? Why is Mitchell not playing? Why is Mitchell not playing?
They're
And
not
then
gonna
they're playing
play.
Alfred Payton all this time, and I'm sitting there. I'm like,
That's why you got some.
why aren't we playing Dennis Smith Jr.? Why aren't we playing Frank Ntilikina? I feel like that's one of the biggest things is that these coaches want to go back to all these veterans and try to win games immediately because the fan base is crying out. Meanwhile, we need to develop our young kids. We need to stop listening to these goddamn fans that always want to win, and we need to develop. We need to build the players, and I think that's what they've finally done. We finally have some young guys. We have a little bit of a core between Knox, Mitchell, RJ, Frank. We have a little bit of a core. We have a couple of picks coming up this year. We have a pick from the Clippers that we got in the Morris trade. We're gonna have hopefully a top pick this year when it goes through the lottery.
I
I
mean,
like
listen,
our young core. We have a nice young core for once.
and to keep touching on David West, I mean, David West's point, I understand with everything going on, right? I think he's really trying to focus on. I think I mean, when he said black coach, right? Then is that what he said?
Yep.
I'm not hiring a black coach. Listen,
Yep.
I think there's a lot of things to be said. The man's been in the league for a long time, so I think he looks at it from a different scope of us as fans and just really reporting on the game. Does he have a point? Yes, I think Mark Jackson's gotten a raw deal since he left Golden State.
I don't think Mark Jackson will ever get a coaching job again.
And
That's my personal opinion.
and that's a story for another day as well. I say that because I feel like we can talk about that all day.
The biggest things about Mark Jackson is I heard that he was very religious and like he tried to push that in the locker room and I think that was one of the reasons why you don't see him.
Rumor mill.
Yeah,
I mean, we don't know. We don't know that to be a fact, and to really tell somebody's story who's been a great player, who's been a great coach.
You're right.
But
I mean, I think that would explain why he hasn't had an opportunity since about 2013.
Not necessarily. Because it sounds like
who would you rather have? A guy that had one little shot in Golden State that did a little bit, or have Tom Thibodeau, who
Mark Jackson is
record with the Bulls.
Mark Jackson. Here's the thing, Taco. Mark Jackson excites the New York fan base because he's a New York guy.
Ugh, Mark Jackson.
Well, so then why is his name? Why does his name always come up when there's a hiring job for the Knicks? So the fact that it doesn't excite you is one thing, and that's your opinion. That's fine.
Right.
I'm just telling you in general that every time the Knicks are
over the last 7 years, it didn't excite
I'll
any.
make my point once you make yours.
Sure. Over the last 7 years, it hasn't excited any NBA team to bring him out of retirement. Your rebuttal.
He's interviewed for jobs and he hasn't gotten the job.
Right.
And why do you think? Yeah, they haven't wanted him. Do you think that his story of what he did in Golden State dictates that? I mean, he did a great job in Golden State. Did he win? They went after him, but that team was all set up by the time he left. So, from the standpoint of what you're saying is that you don't give a man like that a break, and I think that's what David West is touching on.
Would I give him a job over Tom Thibodeau, who's had New York experience that we know plays a style of play which is that New York loves? We like a defensive.
So Thibodeau just did a tremendous job in the Timberwolves, and we had to have him over Mark Jackson.
I mean, personally speaking, at least he was coaching and had more responsibility sooner than Mark Jackson. Mark Jackson hasn't seen anything since 2013. 2013. How are you?
So whose fault? But that's the type of point.
If he wants to be a coach, he'll be an assistant coach.
That's the point that David West is trying to touch on. I think that what you're saying is looking at it from one scope, and what he's saying is looking at it from another scope. Somebody like David West, who's been in the game, understands that people like Mark Jackson, who did do a good job, should have an opportunity, whether that's in New York or anywhere else, to coach over a guy who's gotten several chances. So you mean to tell me that Thibodeau, who didn't do great at the Timberwolves, is so much better off than Mark Jackson to not have gotten the job? Listen, I'm glad we got Thibodeau. I'm happy with Thibodeau. I think that it was a good coaching decision to go with him. But when you sit here and we have a debate about, that's why I said let's just story for another day. Let's park that one. Let's bench it because. People like Mark Jackson should get a job. The guy has the skill set. He was a great player at that. And not saying that he was a great coach, but he has the skill set to be a head coach. Patrick Ewing has been a bench coach, has done a good job as a bench coach, but he hasn't coached. So
that's not true. Patrick
head
Ewing
coach.
is the head coach of Georgetown Warriors.
Yeah, I understand that in college. We're not talking
I
about in
would
college.
I would give Patrick Ewing the job before Mark Jackson because Mark
I wouldn't.
Jackson isn't
I wouldn't.
coaching. Mark
I wouldn't.
Jackson hasn't coached in
So
7
he forgot
years.
how to play.
He
He
hasn't
forgot how
coached
to
in
coach.
7
So he
years.
forgot how to coach.
No,
So he forgot how to play the game.
no. I'm not saying that.
So
I'm
no,
not
that is what
saying
you're
that.
saying. But saying
But
that because
if you're coming to the Knicks after everything we've been through, we want someone that has a little bit more of a record.
the
A little
Timberwolves
bit more
record,
stable.
Timberwolves record, right?
You know what? That Bulls record was good. He was good with the Knicks, and he plays a style that we like to play. And with the pieces that we have, with the Mitchell Robinson, with the Frank Ntilikina, I think that he could be good with the Frank Ntilikina.
The debate where I think that where we got to, and not necessarily it drew off somewhere else where we're talking in comparison Mark Jackson to Thibodeau. It's not what I was trying to make. I'm not trying to make that point. I think
that's a valid question that Knicks fans have because, like you said, a lot of Knicks fans were looking at a guy like Mark Jackson. So, I mean, I think he was probably the only other guy than Thibodeau that most Knicks fans would have been happy with. Do you agree with that at least? If it wasn't Thibodeau, probably Mark Jackson was a number one other guy.
But that's always the case. Every time we've hired a guy, Mark Jackson's been the runner up. Sure. Kind of in the conversation of Knicks fans.
Well, I mean, let's not. Jason Kidd was rumored to have pulled ahead of the job because he did wow them during the interview. So I know that Jason Kidd was the guy that they started leaning towards. And then Woj came out and said that we had signed with Tibs. So I was getting worried that we might go with Jason Kidd. And I'm really happy. Honestly, I would rather have Thibodeau than Kidd.
Man, here's the thing. Listen, I like guys like J. Kidd. I like guys like Mark Jackson. I like guys who have played the game, who've been point guards, who dictate the pace of a game, who understand how to play the game, who can lead guys to make good decisions on the floor. J. Kidd did a tremendous job in Milwaukee and then got fired. There's things that we don't know behind the scenes. I understand that, but I think
like, in a players' league where everyone
you could say that about anybody. J. Kidd came back and took an assistant coach job. He did a tremendous job, I think, in the Nets from building that franchise to where it was nowhere, and then it became a lot more relevant. So I think from that standpoint, I think J. Kidd would have been a good pick too. But listen, again, our hire is Thibodeau. So moving forward and not living in the past, this debate is something that I feel like we're living in the past and not necessarily dictating the present. Present is.
I think in order to move forward to the present, we have to also look at who the other guys were, understand where they went, and kind of think of where they're going. And I think the way they're building this team is like an old school Knicks team. I feel like
where do you see what's the plus minus win column that you think with the Knicks?
I can't say that without the offseason being started. I don't know where we're picking. I don't know what kind of draft. I think we're either going to make a trade or have a top pick. Because guess what?
If we win more than 20 games.
If we have a top 3 pick or a top 10 pick, it's going to matter on what we rank. If we have LaMelo Ball, yes, we're going to win more than 20 games. Absolutely. But are we going to get LaMelo Ball? Are we going to get Chris Paul?
You think we're going to get LaMelo?
Yes. I think.
How is that even a thing?
I think we might trade for him if we don't get the pick because we have some extra picks. LaMelo Ball is one of the top 3 prospects going into.
I'm not saying that he isn't. I don't think that
he's the 6'7" point guard that will probably be a top 10 passer in the league right now once he steps in.
There's no way that we haven't had the opportunity to get a guy like him. So I'm not going to put my all my chips in that basket.
We got RJ last year with the 3rd pick. I mean, RJ looked solid. We have some guys around him, and the difference is this year we have the additional pick from the Clippers. We have our high 2nd round pick this year, plus we have the additional picks that we have from the Mavericks. So unlike years before when the Knicks didn't even own their own pick, this year we have a plethora of picks. So if we wanted to make the move up, and let's just say we're number 5 or number 7, and we want to go up to 3, only going up 4 spots with all these extra picks does make it possible. And there's up a couple of guys also like Killian.
Are the Knicks a playoff team this year?
I have to see what we do first. I can't this offseason because if we get Chris Paul, yes. If we get Chris Paul,
you're sitting here right telling me that you don't even think we're a playoff AC team. But so
you can't tell me to make a prediction.
No, I'm just asking you a question. Asking you a question. I'm not telling you to make a prediction if you don't want to, because you're clearly not. My point is in the hire of Thibodeau. and our debate about Jackson, right, and all the debate about the
We're
head
a
coaching.
playoff team in 2 seasons.
So, would you call a success if in 2 seasons we make the playoffs?
Yes.
Okay. So the way that you're going to dictate this coaching hire is that we need to make the playoffs next year, not this year.
Well, I mean, you mean like 20, like not this season that's playing after the bubble, but
No. After the
the one.
bubble, 22,
Yeah, right,
22.
right. Yeah. Because I think next year we have an outside shot. If listen, if we get Chris Paul and we get a top draft pick, we're making the playoffs.
Wishful thinking.
No,
Wishful thinking.
Chris Paul is super underrated, especially after what he did this year.
I
And
agree that Chris
when
Paul
you
is
look at how
underrated.
bad the East was, the East is really bad. We're not that far out of the playoff picture. And guess
If
what?
you ask me, I think Thibodeau makes a difference. I don't think he gets us to the playoff year 1. I don't think he gets us to the playoff year 2, possibly year 3.
I mean, to say that without not knowing who's on the roster,
That's my prediction as of right now.
you think he's gonna fail? You think?
No, I think it's going to take him. No. I think it's going to take him like 3 years to build any sort of relevant roster to getting us to the playoffs. That's my thought. That's my thought.
Who do you currently like on the?
No. I'm going based off of history. I'm going based off of every single year.
Based off the roster.
No, I'm going based off of history. I'm going based off of history, and that is dictating my thought process. You can't dictate my thought process. I dictate my thought process.
Okay.
You can't dictate it.
You're right.
I do.
You're right. So then here's my question for you. Do the current players in the Knicks even matter then?
Of course they matter. My point is what I'm saying is that
who on this team right now do you think has that potential, or do you think we don't have anyone that has that potential
to get us to the playoffs?
Yeah.
I don't think any of the. I don't think that this team right now with Mitchell, with RJ, I don't think this team right now is playoff potential. That's just what I think. I mean, I think that we need more pieces to getting to even an 8th seed. And Thibodeau's not gonna. He doesn't suit up and play ball.
Sure.
He's not gonna change the game because I think that yes, his leadership will absolutely help. But we still need pieces, and we still need a lot of pieces. So, and we haven't been close in several years, and we've only gotten a couple of pieces due to our record being so bad. So my point and what I'm saying is
that's what Philly did. But then to wrap it out is like, okay, what do you think is the number one piece that Thibodeau would need in order to take us from being just this team that's floating to at least making the playoff? What would you say is the major part that we need to go to that next level, that next step? Not saying we're a championship contender, but the next step to make us a playoff contender, a team that's stable, that can really make it. Where do you think the Knicks need to look, especially knowing that we're gonna have a pretty decent draft pick? We have some picks to play with.
This is not a big man league era anymore. You need a couple shooters, spot shooters that are willing to take big game shots. You need guys that are going to dictate the pace and control the ball. You know, people like Morant, you know, for Memphis are so huge.
Love Morant.
You know, me too. And you know, so a good shooting guard, a good point guard. I know you mentioned CP3. I know CP3's been doing well, and I'm not saying that if we get him, we're not going to be it's not going to make a huge difference. Of course it will. A player like him will make a difference. Yep. But we need a young guy like a CP3. You know, we need a guy that's the next guy that's gonna do like Westbrook and KD did and Harden did, where they played years in OKC and built up that franchise to where it is now.
Well, I mean, I do think we have the foundation of it with some of the pieces that we have between Knox, RJ, Mitchell.
I know, but these guys haven't been difference makers. Yeah, I know they're young. I'm not saying that they haven't played too many seasons together, and I think with Thibodeau that'll help. So I agree with you.
Knox is in season 2, Mitchell's in season 2, RJ's in season 1, and Ntilikina had season 3. I do love that Rose wants to focus on Ntilikina and making him into a player. I think that's the one guy that we have that's super underrated. Defensively, he's already elite. Offensively, he's below average. I think that's one thing that we need to pick up. And I just think that we need a point guard, like you said. And if we don't get a guy like LaMelo, who, like I said, I'm very high on because we do need the point guard. He's 6'7", goes with the positionless basketball. I think and he's a good defender. I think that's really intriguing to me. But a guy like Cole Anthony, and France Killian or the French kid. I think one of those 2 point guards we might be able to get, and maybe get a Chris Paul and start something like that. But I agree with you. I
Well,
think
we'll see, man. We'll see.
getting a point guard is the biggest key to the new NBA. Like you said, it's a fast pace, shoot it up, knock it down, create a league. And Thibodeau honestly doesn't, like you said, he can't go out there and play. We need to get
He's
players
not
that
sitting enough, right?
so we want to thank you guys for coming by and listening to our debate on Tom Thibodeau, if he was the right hire and what he needs to do in order to be the right hire.
Listen, I think right higher. By the way,
Yeah,
to make my point at the end, I think
yeah,
right higher, and I'm happy
right,
about it. And I'm looking forward to it.
right. And like we were saying before, there was a lot of qualified guys, but he does have history with New York, which may make it a little bit an easier transition. He was with us during the time that we were good, during the Patrick Ewing years with the Jeff Van Gundy team. So he's seen what winning basketball is like in New York, and hopefully some of that can rub off on the guys. Hopefully we can actually get this point guard to take us to the new millennia. And stay tuned for the Knicks, because that's one train wreck that we will always cover. So you guys have a wonderful day, and we look forward to seeing you next time.